Hey guys, this is Hillbilly Talk with Shane Simmons, and that's episode 4. Time flies when you're having fun, I suppose. But I have a scratchy voice I'm dealing with. Hopefully you can bear with me. I guess kids are back in school, and the nightmare germ situation that brings about always gets everybody down, it seems like. But I'll power through as best I can, so stay with me and we'll get through this together. Last week I'd mentioned in passing that the United Mine Workers Association wasn't nearly as powerful as it had been in the past. Now, and I had a question from Mr. Chris Meadows asking why that is true. So I'll go through a little bit of the timeline of events that helped lead to the downfall of the UMWA as a major power in this area. Some of it started as far back as the 1960s. There was a lot of internal conflict between a fellow named Joseph Jock Yablonsky, who was running for the presidency of the UMWA, versus Tony Boyle. So Yablonsky really wanted to have it more democratized, where it was a bottom-up approach from the rank-and-file miners into the leadership of UMWA, whereas Tony Boyle kind of wanted to keep the status quo, and he was considered more of an authoritarian type of leader. So there was a lot of conflict there. They had an election where Boyle supposedly or allegedly won the election, but there was a lot of dispute about that. And it ended up Yablonsky pressed in court and tried to get the Department of Labor and all kinds of people involved to check the legitimacy of this election. Now, in the meantime, shortly after the election, Yablonsky, his wife, and his daughter are murdered on December 31st of 1969. Terrible tragedy. And then eventually it's discovered that Tony Boyle had essentially ordered a hit on Yablonsky and had him wiped out almost mafia style. So that, as you can imagine, shook the very foundation of the UMWA. They lost a lot of confidence in the leadership. Boyle was convicted in 1974 and sentenced to, I believe, 3 life sentences for the murders. So, it really shook the foundation. He was replaced by a guy named Arnold Miller, who, by all accounts, was apparently a nice guy and pretty soft-spoken, but that didn't really satisfy the more rabble-rouser type of UMWA member. If you ever saw the documentary Harlan County, USA, which is fantastic, I highly recommend it. There's a little piece that shows Arnold Miller and how he tried to be the nice guy, but I think that just in some cases irked people more than it brought confidence to them. So that was his story. So you get to the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. The coal mining is at its best is a roller coaster ride, but prices go up and down. A lot of people leaving the industry. The mechanization really hurt. A lot less jobs for people to do. They were replaced by machines, so they were pushed out of the industry. Then you had any type of layoffs. A lot of people would leave the area and get into a totally different industry. They just get so tired of the yo-yo lifestyle, they'd get done with it and move away. So we saw a lot of people move to Charlotte, North Carolina during that time. Some still moved into the auto industry. They just got away from this to something they felt to be more stable for them. So that really helped the decline of miners in general, and certainly union miners as well. So then you get to the Pittston strike in '89, which really did a number on a lot of union guys leaving because it was dragged out for a year or so, and people just could not make it on the rations that they got from the union. So a lot of those people left during the middle of the strike and never came back. I remember a lot of people. I worked in the coal mining industry during that time, and it was just interesting to see how people, once they left, they just didn't want any part of it again and just got tired of that lifestyle. Now, another thing that happened that hurt with younger miners, when I came out I was about 18 years old, and what had happened previously was there was a big pool of jobs and a big pool of miners. Well, as time had went on, it kept shrinking and shrinking, kind of a funnel situation where you had this much fewer jobs and a lot of miners trying to fit into that funnel. And what it would happen was it was very difficult for new miners, I guess they call them red hats, to break into the industry. And so they had a little resentment toward the union for not allowing them into the industry because they protected seniority and that kind of thing, which is certainly understandable. But if you're trying to break into that industry, it could also lead to you not having any particular loyalty to the union. So that hurt, and it just kept on crawling down and down and down, and it just really became a situation where the union dropped off tremendously. I think in 1946 the union peaked at about 500,000 members, and these days it's down to about 80,000. And of those 80, there's a fraction, probably around 10,000 that are actually active miners. I was shocked just a few years back to see that there is no active union miners in Kentucky these days, which is mind-boggling. If you watched Harlan County, USA, you know how big that was. But that was some of the factors that have went into it, and of course, time goes on, and the demand for coal has shrunk, and then to some degree, the union was a big victim of its own success, because the union was developed ostensibly to have increased safety measures, to get better pay and better benefits. So they pushed and pushed and got a lot of safety regulations became the law of the land. So they didn't need a union pushing that. They were more ingrained into the actual system of government. And of course, pay, those gaps closed quite a bit as well too. Kind of like anything else, the ebb and flow of mining. So when things were going well, non-union miners could get paid as much or sometimes more than the union guys because it was just such a competitive situation. The long story short is that they really over time eroded in membership and have now dwindled down to where it's mostly retirees that are engaged in the union. Now it's funny too because my family history is kind of odd. My grandfather I should say, on my father's side, he was a red hot Democrat, had the bronze bust of JFK in his house and everything else, but he did not like unions, which is kind of contradictory for that era. And then my mother's father was a union man. He worked for Joe Ridge, basically buried with his union card. And I did see the benefits, especially the health and all that was given to my grandmother after his death even. So I saw both sides of that. It's kind of odd to have that kind of perspective. And also alluded to the fact that I actually worked during the Pittston coal strike. And there was a little bit of an illusion. If you look at people, you would think that the union was universally revered here and that only people that stood companies were the people that worked for the company. But that's not necessarily the case. What would happen was, and this is an example from my own life, I was getting a haircut. And a union guy came in and interrupted the haircut, and he was holding a bunch of signs, and he brought one to the barber and said, and I'm not going to name names, I think both these people are still alive, best of my knowledge, and so I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but he basically sounded like a mafia threat. He was just, here's your sign to put in your window, and he was like, I don't know if, thank you, I'll think about it, and he was like, it'd be good for you to put this sign up, right? You do know that it would be really good if you'd put this sign up. And of course the barber who, in these small towns, you didn't want to offend anybody on either side. You couldn't afford to. It's like if I cater to the union, well, these non-union guys are going to get mad, and if I do, vice versa. But it was just basically a threat of, you better have that sign up by the time I come back. If not, then we're going to have some problems. So you drive through town, you're like, oh, we support the union. You'd see that in every single business, which whether or not that was actually the case is to be determined, but I know from my own personal experiences that the union was not shrinking violets. They were pretty aggressive about that. Another thing I noticed during that strike too is kind of strange that I love that Harlan County, USA, and a couple of these other documentaries have really shown a light on the fact that how heavily involved women were with strikes. They were really, in a lot of cases, they drove it a lot more than the men did. They could be much more hostile, demanding, confrontational. So it was interesting to see that. I'm glad to see that was captured. They really were a major part of these strikes, in some cases more so than the men. So it's kind of interesting to see how that dynamic played out. But anyway, these days with the coal mining slacking off, and even though it's come back slightly here lately, it's still not, the mechanization has really replaced the need for a lot of miners, and it's just not ever going to be what it used to be. And so same thing for the union. I don't know what their future is, but it's got to be pretty grim. I saw they're looking to get into other things other than coal mining, so that might be a good move for them because they're really going to, I can't imagine how much funds they have left. Because I remember I was up in Bishop, Virginia, and I was just out there doing my normal thing and taking pictures and videos, and somebody came out and thought I was with the union, that I was going to be mowing the memorial. And they were just saying how things like that had gone away. They thought that the union used to take care of memorials, keeping them mowed and cleaned and picked up. And then as funds have dropped off, that stuff has kind of fallen by the wayside. So that's a bad side of the union leaving. They're starting to cut back on benefits and the things that they do. And so that's definitely a troublesome spot for the fact the union's dropping off. But anyway, that's my story about the union for now. And I'll hopefully, if you got any, like I said, if you got any more emails, send them to me and we'll check them out. I do have another topic I want to talk about in the future that's really a hot button issue for me, and it's this thing called ESOL script. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but I'm going to get into that a little bit. It's kind of what I like to call it. It's definitely a thing that is all of a sudden some outrage about a script system that didn't exist, but I'll get into that more in a future video. Just want to let you know about that because this is a very interesting topic to me. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.